Imagine you are the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire. Your eyes open to silence, the silence of 20 million souls waiting for your first word. Behind carved screens, 6 viziers hold reports that could reshape kingdoms with a breath from your lips. In the harem, a concubine has fainted from ambition, while another laughed too freely at the fountain. You have ruled for 17 years, from Vienna's gates to the Persian Gulf, through wars that made Europe tremble. Yet each morning, the weight of silk and stone presses against your chest like an unfinished prayer. This is absolute power, and its absolute burden. You rise slowly from your bed. Your joints protest against the cold that seeps through even the thickest palace walls. Around you, the palace stirs like a great beast awakening. Servants move through corridors with practiced silence. They know that noise can mean exile or worse. Your personal attendant, Mehmet Aga, appears at exactly the right moment. He holds robes that smell of sandalwood and the faint trace of rosewater that clings to everything in these walls. You allow yourself to be dressed in layers of silk and brocade. Each piece transforms you from a man with stiff joints into the commander of the faithful. The color of your turban speaks to your mood today. Your choice of ceremonial dagger suggests which council members you might favor. Nothing in the Ottoman court happens by accident. Every morning you wear power like armor made from cloth and precious stones. Through your chamber window, you see the Bosphorus stretching toward the Black Sea. Ships move like insects across gray-green waters. They carry grain from Egypt, furs from Muscovy, spices from islands whose names common people cannot pronounce. The empire's wealth flows through that strait like blood through a heart. You are that heart, pumping life and gold through territories spanning 3 continents. Yet this morning, like every morning, you feel the peculiar loneliness of absolute power. Every smile you see is calculated. Every word spoken to you is weighed before it leaves another's lips. The first vizier enters as the sun clears the horizon. Mahmud Pasha is careful and gray-bearded. He served your father before you. He carries morning intelligence folded in papers bearing seals from governors in Baghdad, Damascus, Belgrade. News travels slowly across vast distances. It arrives in waves telling stories already weeks old. A harvest failed in Anatolia. Venetian merchants request new trading privileges. The Safavid Shah moved troops closer to the eastern border. Whether this means war or posturing remains unclear. You listen with the expression you have perfected over decades. Attentive but revealing nothing, wise but not eager. You understand that advisors watch your face as carefully as you watch theirs. They search for signs of favor or displeasure to guide their own actions. The art of rule lies not in making quick decisions, but in letting others think they understand your thoughts while revealing nothing important. As the morning briefing continues, your attention drifts to sounds from deeper in the palace. The harem quarters come alive with complex rhythms. Servants prepare baths. Musicians tune instruments. Women have soft conversations where they wield influence through beauty, intelligence, and subtle manipulation of desire. Your harem is not just wives and concubines. It is a political institution as carefully structured as your council of ministers. Alliances form and dissolve like morning mist. A single glance or gift can alter the balance of power far beyond bedroom walls. The second vizier arrives with news from imperial kitchens. Tonight, there will be a feast for the Venetian ambassador. Musicians, dancers, elaborate dishes will demonstrate the empire's abundance. Every meal served to foreign dignitaries is diplomacy. It shows visiting lords and merchants that the Ottoman court has refinements surpassing European kings. You nod approval, though your mind moves toward more delicate business. Word has reached you through careful channels. One of the newer girls in the harem has caught attention from several influential women there. She is young, perhaps 16, with dark eyes and quiet intelligence that could prove valuable or dangerous. Her name is Ace. She arrived 3 months ago as tribute from a Crimean chief, seeking your favor in a grazing dispute. Such girls often fade into the background, becoming servants or minor wives whose children never approach the throne. But occasionally, one has the right combination of beauty, wit, and instinct to rise through complex harem hierarchies. You noticed her during one of your irregular harem visits, not for her appearance, which is pleasing but not extraordinary. You noticed the way other women move around her. Favorites watch her with careful attention predators pay to potential rivals. Servants treat her with respect slightly beyond her current station. Most telling, your mother, the Valide Sultan, mentioned her twice recently, both times with casual indifference that indicates serious consideration. You contemplate the intricate politics of desire and power that play out daily in your household. Western visitors who gain audience often misunderstand the harem's purpose. They imagine it as pure pleasure where you indulge physical appetites. They fail to grasp it is really a sophisticated political machine. Future dynasties are shaped here. Alliances between powerful families are negotiated through marriages. Mothers of potential heirs compete for influence that could outlast your own reign. The morning council concludes with trade routes and tax collection discussions. Your thoughts remain partially focused on harem machinations. You have ruled long enough to understand that women in those quarters wield influence often exceeding your male advisors. They carry messages between powerful families. They shape education of princes who might rule one day. They create loyalty networks crucial during succession crises. A smart concubine can become a queen mother. A clever queen mother can become the true power behind a future sultan's throne. Your first major decision involves a gift. You instruct your head eunuch, Kazim Aga, to deliver a white rose to A's quarters. Not unusual in itself. Flowers are commonly given to harem women, but significant in timing and choice. White roses carry particular meaning. They suggest purity, but also potential. Innocence that might transform into something substantial. The gift will be noticed by everyone in the harem within hours. It will spark conversations and calculations rippling through hidden networks of influence and ambition. Kazim Aga receives your instruction with the blank expression that makes him invaluable. As head eunuch, he serves as primary intermediary between you and the harem. He carries messages, gifts, invitations, often holding more political weight than military dispatches. His loyalty is absolute because his position depends entirely on your favor. His discretion is legendary because palace survival requires holding secrets that could topple governments. The rose will be delivered during the morning meal, when harem social hierarchies are most visible. Women eat together in a great hall decorated with Iznik tiles and Isfahan carpets. Seating arrangements reflect current standings in the complex pecking order governing their daily lives. Official wives sit nearest the head, followed by favored concubines, then newer arrivals, finally servants and attendants. These arrangements shift constantly based on pregnancies, your current preferences, and ever-changing alliances among the women themselves. Ice currently sits in middle sections, marking her as someone of potential interest, but not yet established importance. Your rose will change her position immediately. It will move her closer to head tables and earn attention that could prove beneficial or dangerous. Other women will watch her reaction, measuring her response for signs of ambition, gratitude, or political intelligence that marks successful harem players. You spend the next hour reviewing architectural plans for a new mosque you are commissioning in Belgrade. The building will serve multiple purposes. It will demonstrate Ottoman power to Christian populations in the Balkans. It will provide employment for local craftsmen whose loyalty can be purchased through work. It will create a lasting monument to your reign that will outlive current political crises and military campaigns. Great rulers build not just empires, but cities. You understand that stone and mortar secure legacy more effectively than military victories that future generations might reverse. As noon approaches, you allow yourself a brief walk through the palace's inner gardens. These spaces provide refuge from constant attention of advisors, servants, petitioners who fill your public hours. The gardens are designed to mirror paradise as described in the Quran. Geometric patterns of roses, jasmine, orange trees surround fountains that catch sunlight and scatter it in patterns shifting throughout the day. Running water masks conversations, making gardens one of the few palace places where private thoughts can be safely contemplated. Here, surrounded by beauty you commissioned, but rarely enjoy without interruption, you consider the afternoon's more delicate business. You have decided to request Ice's presence for a private audience, not in your bedchamber, which would signal immediate physical interest. In your private study, which suggests more complex intentions. Such meetings are carefully choreographed affairs where both participants understand they engage in political theater disguised as personal interaction. The invitation will be delivered during the afternoon rest period, when the harem traditionally withdraws to private quarters for quiet activities. Reading, embroidery, intimate conversations where alliances form, and information trades. Timing is crucial. Too early seems impulsive. Too late might appear to result from wine or temporary passion rather than considered judgment. Your study occupies a palace corner overlooking both the Bosphorus and the city's spreading neighborhoods. Maps cover walls, some showing current empire boundaries, others depicting trade routes connecting Istanbul to markets in Venice, Vienna, Baghdad. Books fill shelves along 3 walls. Volumes in Arabic, Persian, Turkish, Latin represent accumulated knowledge of civilizations the Ottomans conquered, absorbed, or learned from. Here you conduct the empire's most sensitive business. Spies report on foreign courts. Governors receive instructions that could reshape millions of lives. The afternoon prayer call echoes across the city as you prepare for Ace's arrival. You position yourself behind a desk, covered with correspondence you will appear to study, though your attention will actually focus on observing her reactions to carefully chosen remarks and questions. The meeting will serve multiple purposes: evaluating her intelligence and political instincts, sending a message to other harem residents about your current interests, providing information to your mother, who will undoubtedly receive detailed reports about every aspect of the encounter. Ace arrives precisely on time, escorted by 2 female servants who withdraw immediately upon delivering her to the study's threshold. She wears simple blue silk that complements her dark hair. Her jewelry is modest enough to avoid appearing presumptuous, but fine enough to demonstrate she understands the audience's importance. Her posture suggests respect without submission, confidence without arrogance. Exactly the balance successful harem residents learn to project. You gesture toward a chair positioned at proper distance from your desk, close enough for comfortable conversation, far enough to maintain formal boundaries that protocol requires. She seats herself with fluid grace that marks women trained in palace etiquette. Her hands fold in her lap. Her expression is attentive but not eager. These first moments will establish tone for their interaction and possibly for any future relationship between you. Rather than speaking immediately, you allow silence to stretch while you appear to finish reading a document. This is standard technique serving both to demonstrate your power. You can make anyone wait, even when you specifically requested their presence, and to observe how potential allies or enemies handle uncertainty. Some fidget when forced to wait in silence, revealing nervousness or impatience that can be exploited. Others stare around the room, gathering information they might use later. The most dangerous ones, like Ice, sit quietly and watch you with calm attention, suggesting they conduct their own evaluation. When you finally look up from papers, she meets your gaze directly but briefly, long enough to acknowledge your attention without appearing bold. Her eyes are indeed striking, not just for their deep brown color flecked with gold, but for intelligence moving behind them. You have learned to recognize the difference between mere beauty, common enough in the harem, and perceptive awareness that could make a woman genuinely valuable as advisor, ally, or threat. You begin with conventional questions about her comfort in the palace, her health, her adaptation to court life. Her answers are appropriate and carefully phrased. They reveal enough personality to seem genuine while avoiding statements that could be interpreted as complaints or presumptions. She thanks you for your concern. She praises kindness of other harem residents. She expresses gratitude for opportunity to serve in whatever capacity you deem appropriate, but you listen for subtleties beyond her words. The slight hesitation before she describes her relationship with other women suggests awareness of complex social dynamics surrounding her. The way she mentions missing family without dwelling on the subject indicates emotional intelligence and political wisdom. The manner in which she asks after your own health and the empire's prosperity demonstrates understanding that personal conversations in the palace always carry broader implications. As your conversation continues, you introduce topics that will reveal more about her character and capabilities. You mention recent news from various provinces, watching to see whether she responds with genuine interest or polite attention. You speak briefly about books, noting which subjects seem to engage her most deeply. You describe some diplomatic challenges currently facing the empire, curious whether she grasps the complexity of managing relationships with both Christian European powers and Muslim rivals in Persia and North Africa. Her responses indicate education extending beyond basic literacy and cultural knowledge all harem residents receive. She demonstrates familiarity with poetry, history, even geography, suggesting either exceptional natural intelligence or additional tutoring someone considered worth providing. Most significantly, she seems to understand strategic thinking behind political decisions. She grasps not just what is happening, but why certain choices might be made and what their consequences could be. The interview concludes after precisely the length protocol suggests for such meetings. Long enough for meaningful evaluation, brief enough to avoid suggesting either excessive interest or insufficient attention. You dismiss her with expressions of pleasure at your conversation and vague indications you might speak again in the future. She withdraws with exactly appropriate gratitude and respect, neither presuming on your courtesy nor failing to acknowledge the honor you showed her. Alone again in your study, you consider what you learned. Ace possesses the combination of beauty, intelligence, and political awareness that could make her genuinely useful. But she also demonstrates careful self-control that marks potentially dangerous opponents. She is clearly ambitious, but her ambitions appear tempered by realistic understanding of palace politics and her current position. Most importantly, she seems to grasp that any advancement will depend not on beauty alone, but on her ability to make herself valuable to you in ways extending beyond physical attraction. The afternoon's remaining business involves meetings with provincial administrators who traveled to Istanbul to report on conditions in their territories and request resources for various projects. These sessions provide you with information helping you understand how effectively your policies are being implemented across vast distances. Local governors possess enormous autonomy by necessity. Communications between the capital and distant provinces can take weeks or months, making centralized micromanagement impossible. But they also represent potential threats if they become too independent or powerful within their own regions. Each administrator brings news requiring careful interpretation. Tax collection rates might indicate economic prosperity or administrative efficiency, but they could also reflect harsh enforcement that might eventually provoke rebellion. Reports of peaceful conditions could mean effective governance, or merely successful suppression of dissent that might explode later if underlying causes are not addressed. Military commanders describe border security in terms that might reflect genuine stability, or their own reluctance to admit weakness that could invite enemy action. You listen to these reports with the same careful attention you showed during morning briefings. You ask questions revealing your understanding of local conditions while avoiding suggestions that might be interpreted as criticism of current policies. Your administrators need to believe in your confidence in their abilities, while also understanding that their actions are being closely monitored and evaluated. The balance between delegation and control is crucial for maintaining effective governance across territories stretching from the Danube to the Persian Gulf. As evening approaches, the palace's rhythms shift toward the day's final major event, the feast for the Venetian ambassador. Such diplomatic entertainments serve multiple purposes beyond simple hospitality. They demonstrate Ottoman court wealth and sophistication to foreign observers who will report their impressions to rulers and merchants throughout Europe. They provide opportunities for informal conversations that can advance negotiations more effectively than formal diplomatic sessions. They allow you to display your power in ways that impress both visitors and your own subjects. The banquet hall has been prepared with elaborate attention to detail marking all Ottoman court ceremonies. Tables are arranged to reflect hierarchical relationships between guests, with most honored positions closest to your own seat. Services of gold and silver catch light from hundreds of candles arranged throughout the room. Musicians positioned in alcoves around the hall will provide entertainment between courses, playing compositions demonstrating court cultural refinement, while avoiding melodies that might be considered inappropriate by visitors from Christian lands. The menu itself has been designed to showcase the empire's culinary diversity and abundance. Dishes represent cooking traditions of territories from the Balkans to the Arabian Peninsula, prepared by chefs whose skills have been refined through years of competition for positions in imperial kitchens. Spices arrive from markets in Alexandria, Isfahan, and distant islands beyond India. Wines come from vineyards in Greece and Hungary. Sweets incorporate techniques learned from master confectioners in Damascus and Baghdad. But the evening's true purpose extends beyond impressing foreign guests. The feast will provide you with opportunities to observe your own court's internal dynamics. You will note which officials seek access to the Venetian delegation and what topics they choose to discuss. Conversations overheard during such events often reveal more about domestic political currents than formal intelligence reports. Wine and social pressure encourage people to speak more freely than they might during official meetings. You enter the banquet hall at the precisely calculated moment that will maximize the evening's impact. Too early, and you would appear eager to please guests. Too late, and you might seem disrespectful of diplomatic protocol. Your arrival is accompanied by music, selected to convey majesty without appearing threatening, and by ceremonial displays demonstrating military power while emphasizing the empire's peaceful intentions toward Venice's commercial interests. The Venetian ambassador, Count Lorenzo Giustiniani, represents one of Europe's most sophisticated diplomatic traditions. Venice has maintained trading relationships with Ottoman territories for centuries, adapting to changing political circumstances with pragmatic flexibility that has made the Republic wealthy and durable. Giustiniani himself is an experienced negotiator who understands both commercial and strategic aspects of Venetian-Ottoman relations, making him a valuable counterpart for discussions that could affect trade routes worth millions of ducats annually. Evening conversations range across topics that will influence future relations between the two powers. Trade agreements need updating to reflect changing conditions in Mediterranean markets. Territorial boundaries require clarification, where Venetian and Ottoman interests intersect in the Balkans and around the Black Sea. Military cooperation possibilities are discussed in terms diplomatic enough to avoid alarming other European powers, while concrete enough to address shared concerns about piracy and rival territorial ambitions. Throughout these discussions, you maintain the demeanor that has served you effectively for nearly 2 decades of rule. You appear engaged with guests' concerns while revealing nothing of your own decision-making processes. You demonstrate knowledge of commercial and military details that impress the Venetians while avoiding commitments that might limit your future options. Most importantly, you convey the impression of a ruler whose power is so secure that you can afford to be generous in negotiations, while also suggesting this generosity should not be mistaken for weakness. As the feast continues into the evening, servants move through the hall, refilling wine cups and replacing finished dishes with new courses. You eat moderately, as is your practice during diplomatic occasions when clear thinking is more important than physical pleasure. You observe how guests respond to different aspects of entertainment, noting which dishes they praise most enthusiastically, and which musical performances seem to engage their attention most effectively. Such information might seem trivial, but understanding foreign preferences can provide useful insights during future negotiations. Evening entertainment includes performances by dancers, whose skills have been refined through years of training in techniques passed down through generations of court artists. Their movements tell stories drawn from Persian poetry and Arabian folklore, conveying narratives of love, war, and divine intervention through gestures that have been codified into elaborate artistic language. You watch your guests' reactions to these performances, noting that the Venetians seem more comfortable with dances emphasizing artistic skill over emotional expression, probably reflecting their own cultural preferences for formal beauty over passionate display. But even as you participate in diplomatic theater, part of your attention remains focused on the day's earlier business. The harem will be buzzing with discussion about your gift to Ace and your subsequent private meeting. Other women will be analyzing every detail they can gather about the encounter, looking for clues about your intentions and their own prospects for advancement. Your mother will be receiving reports and forming her own opinions about whether this new favorite represents opportunity or threat to the family's long-term interests. Harem politics are always complex, but they become particularly intense when new women appear to be gaining your attention. Established favorites worry about losing influence that took years to accumulate. Newer arrivals wonder whether supporting or opposing rising competitors will better serve their own ambitions. Servants and eunuchs find their loyalties tested as different factions seek information and allies in ongoing maneuvering for position and power. These dynamics are not merely personal rivalries disguised as political competition. Harem women wield genuine influence over imperial policy through their access to you and their connections to powerful families throughout the empire. A concubine who bears a son might see him elevated to provincial governor, giving her indirect control over tax collection and military recruitment in important territories. A clever wife can funnel information between her family and the court, shaping trade policies or diplomatic initiatives in ways that serve both imperial and personal interests. You understand these realities and generally encourage competition among harem residents, because it provides you with multiple sources of information and advice, while preventing any single woman from accumulating enough power to challenge your authority directly. But you also know that harem politics can become destructive if allowed to operate without limits, potentially creating the kind of instability that weakened previous dynasties when succession disputes turned violent. As the diplomatic feast winds toward its conclusion, you begin the gradual process of withdrawal that protocol requires. Too abrupt a departure would suggest dissatisfaction with evening proceedings, while remaining too long might imply you need your guests' company more than they need your attention. The timing of your exit will be noted by everyone present and interpreted as a signal about your satisfaction with negotiations and your expectations for future relations. The Venetian ambassador and his delegation are escorted from the banquet hall with ceremonies matching those that welcome them, ensuring their final impressions of Ottoman hospitality will be positive. Musicians play as they depart. Servants present them with gifts, demonstrating the empire's craftsmanship while providing concrete reminders of evening discussions. These parting presents are carefully chosen to reflect both respect for Venice's importance and expectation that future cooperation will prove mutually beneficial. Alone again after hours of careful diplomatic performance, you feel familiar exhaustion that follows such events. Entertaining foreign dignitaries requires constant attention to nuances of language, gesture, and protocol that can affect relationships worth more than most provincial tax revenues. A misunderstood comment or inappropriate response could damage negotiations that took months to arrange, while successful diplomatic theater can open opportunities that might benefit the empire for decades. The palace has grown quiet as midnight approaches, with only essential servants and guards remaining active in public areas. Your personal quarters offer refuge from the day's demands, but they also provide space where you can contemplate decisions and observations that will shape tomorrow's activities. Sleep will come eventually, but first you need time to process information you gathered and consider how it might influence your ongoing management of imperial affairs. You walk slowly through corridors connecting your public and private spaces, noting how moonlight filters through latticed windows to create patterns on marble floors polished to mirror-like perfection. The palace at night possesses different character than during daylight hours, when it bustles with activities of hundreds of residents and workers. After dark, it becomes a place of shadows and whispers, where conversations carry farther than intended, and where accumulated weight of centuries seems to press more heavily on current occupants. In your private study, maps and correspondence wait for attention you were unable to give them during the day's more pressing activities. Reports from spies in European capitals will require careful analysis to separate reliable intelligence from rumors and deliberate misinformation. Requests from provincial governors will need evaluation to determine which truly require immediate action and which can be delayed or delegated to subordinates. Letters from family members and allies will demand responses that balance personal relationships with political necessities. But tonight, as you settle into the chair where you conduct the empire's most sensitive business, your thoughts return to the afternoon's encounter with ice. Your conversation revealed a young woman whose intelligence and political awareness exceeded what you expected, but it also raised questions about her ultimate ambitions and loyalties. Is she genuinely interested in serving the empire's interests? Or is she primarily focused on advancing her own position within palace hierarchy? Can she be trusted with information or responsibilities extending beyond harem traditional boundaries? Or would such trust eventually prove dangerous to your authority? These questions have no immediate answers. You have learned through decades of rule that patience often provides better solutions than haste. Ice will reveal more about her character and capabilities through her actions in coming weeks and months, particularly in how she handles attention and opportunities that your notice will bring her. Other harem residents will test her through challenges both subtle and direct, providing you with additional information about her responses to pressure and competition. The night is growing late, but you find yourself reluctant to end a day that provided several interesting developments. Diplomatic negotiations with Venice proceeded more smoothly than you anticipated, suggesting future trade agreements might be concluded with less difficulty than some advisors predicted. Intelligence reports from provincial governors were generally positive, indicating the empire's administration is functioning effectively, despite enormous challenges of governing territories spanning 3 continents. Most intriguingly, The day brought you into contact with someone who might prove valuable addition to your inner circle of advisors and allies. Ace's combination of beauty, intelligence, and political awareness makes her potentially useful in ways extending far beyond her current status as harem resident. If she continues demonstrating qualities you observed during your meeting, she might eventually be entrusted with responsibilities that would make her genuinely influential within the palace's power structure. But such possibilities remain speculative. You have learned to be cautious about investing too much hope or attention in individuals who have not yet proven their long-term value. The palace is full of people who seemed promising initially, but ultimately disappointed you through lack of ability, conflicted loyalties, or simple inability to handle pressures that come with proximity to absolute power. Better to observe and evaluate carefully before making commitments that might prove difficult to reverse. The hour has grown truly late by the time you finally acknowledge your need for sleep. Tomorrow will bring new challenges and opportunities, new information to process and decisions to make. Provincial governors will require guidance on matters ranging from tax collection to military deployments. Diplomatic correspondence will need attention as relationships with European powers continue evolving in response to changing military and commercial circumstances. Harem complex politics will continue unfolding, requiring your ongoing attention to ensure competition among women remains productive rather than destructive. As you prepare for bed, assisted by servants whose discretion has been tested through years of intimate service, you reflect on the peculiar nature of absolute power. You can command armies, reshape trade routes, and determine fates of millions of people. Yet you remain subject to the same physical needs and limitations affecting all human beings. You require sleep, food, and shelter just like your poorest subjects. You can be wounded by weapons, sickened by disease, and ultimately claimed by death regardless of your temporal authority. This awareness of mortality has grown stronger as you aged, making you more conscious of the need to prepare the empire for eventual transition to new leadership. Your sons are still young, but they will need education and experience that will prepare them for responsibilities they might someday inherit. Administrative systems you refined during your reign will need to prove capable of functioning effectively under different leadership styles, and in response to challenges you cannot currently anticipate. The bed awaiting you is covered with silks from Damascus and furs from territories around the Black Sea, providing comfort matching your status while serving as tangible reminders of the empire's geographic reach and commercial connections. But luxury is less important to you now than the simple prospect of rest that will restore your energy for tomorrow's duties. Sleep has become precious not because it provides escape from responsibility, but because it offers restoration necessary for continued effective rule. As consciousness fades and dreams begin taking shape in your mind, your last coherent thoughts focus not on the day's specific achievements or challenges, but on the continuing nature of your obligations. The empire will survive your eventual death, as it survived deaths of your predecessors, but its prosperity and stability depend on decisions you make during years remaining to you. Every choice regarding personnel, policy, and priorities will influence Ottoman future in ways that might not become apparent for decades or even generations. Sleep comes finally, bringing rest that allows absolute power to continue functioning effectively. The palace settles into quiet rhythms of night, with guards maintaining their watches and servants preparing for tomorrow's renewal of activities that have continued for centuries and will continue for centuries more. The empire sleeps fitfully, as empires always do, sustained by energy and attention of thousands of individuals whose combined efforts maintain complex systems governing millions of lives across vast territories where the sun never fully sets on. Ottoman authority. Morning will come again, as it always does, bringing new intelligence from distant provinces, new challenges from rival powers, and new opportunities for careful statecraft that has built and maintained one of history's greatest empires. You will wake to face these responsibilities with the same mixture of duty and determination that has sustained you through nearly 2 decades of rule, knowing that each day brings both possibility of achievement and risk of failure that accompanies all human endeavors, regardless of their scale or importance. But that is tomorrow's concern. Tonight offers the gift of rest, temporary suspension of consciousness that allows even emperors to restore themselves for continued service to demands of power and needs of people whose lives depend on your wisdom, strength, and dedication to the complex art of governing human societies across vast distances and cultural differences that define the Ottoman realm in its age of greatest extent and influence. The story of this single day will be forgotten by history, which remembers only great events and decisions that shaped destinies of nations and peoples. But it is precisely such ordinary days, accumulated over years and decades, that create foundation for extraordinary achievements that earn empires their places in records surviving the centuries. Power is exercised not only in moments of crisis and triumph, but in quiet, careful attention to detail that maintains systems and relationships, making both crisis and triumph possible. In the darkness of your bedchamber, surrounded by accumulated wealth and beauty of an empire stretching from Vienna's gates to the Indian Ocean's shores, you sleep the sleep of those whose authority is both absolute and absolutely demanding, whose rest is earned through constant vigilance, and whose dreams are shaped by weight of responsibilities that can never be fully set aside, even in temporary refuge of unconsciousness that restores body and mind for renewal of duties that will continue until death claims even the most powerful of earthly rulers. The night passes quietly, marked only by regular sounds of palace guards changing shifts and distant calls of muezzins who summon faithful to prayers continuing regardless of political circumstances or imperial concerns. The empire's heartbeat continues its steady rhythm, pumping life and energy through systems connecting regions and peoples whose diversity is matched only by their common subjection to Ottoman authority and their shared dependence on your wisdom and effectiveness as the man who sleeps in the palace overlooking waters where Europe and Asia meet in eternal dance of civilizations that has shaped human history since the beginning of recorded time. And in the morning, you will wake again to the weight of silk and stone, to the burden that has no end except death, to the privilege and price of absolute power in a world where empires rise and fall like the sun each day, where individual rulers pass like seasons while the great game of civilization continues its endless cycle of ambition, achievement, and the ultimate surrender that awaits all who dare to shape the destinies of nations and the fate of millions who trust their lives to the wisdom and strength of those who claim the right to rule over the vast theater where human history unfolds in all its complexity, beauty, and terror. But for now, you rest. Your breathing slows. Your muscles relax against silk sheets that cost more than most families earn in years. The palace around you settles into its nighttime rhythm. Guards walk their routes on marble floors that echo softly in empty corridors. Fountains continue their endless song in courtyards where no one walks until dawn. The Bosphorus moves past your windows, carrying ships toward the Black Sea where other empires watch and wait. In the harem quarters, women sleep in chambers perfumed with jasmine and rose oil. Some dream of children they left behind in distant villages. Others dream of sons they might bear who could rule provinces or even succeed you on the throne. A few dream of escape to lives they never lived, but sometimes imagine in the darkest hours before dawn. Ace sleeps among them, the white rose you sent her pressed between the pages of a book of Persian poetry she reads when no one is watching. Your mother, the Valide Sultan, sits in her private room reviewing reports from spies and informants throughout the palace. She knows which servants can be trusted and which ones sell information to the highest bidder. She knows which concubines are pregnant before they know themselves. She knows which governors are stealing from tax collections and which generals are planning to ask for your daughter's hand in marriage to secure their loyalty. Her network of knowledge spans the empire like a spider's web, and she sits at its center, pulling strings that move through shadows to shape events in ways that even you sometimes do not see until they unfold. In the kitchens, bakers knead tomorrow's bread. The ovens never cool completely because the palace never stops eating. Servants will need food before dawn prayers. Guards will want hot tea when the morning cold seeps through stone walls. Cooks plan meals for provincial governors who will arrive next week seeking your favor and fearing your displeasure in equal measure. The head cook, Osman, tastes soup that will be served to minor diplomats and finds it lacking in salt. A small detail that could insult guests and damage relationships worth thousands of gold pieces in annual tribute. Outside the palace walls, Istanbul sleeps uneasily. Merchants dream of caravans arriving from Damascus loaded with silk and spices. Craftsmen worry about guild taxes that seem to increase every year. Sailors prepare for voyages to Venetian ports, where they will sell goods and buy others, carrying the empire's wealth across waters controlled by navies that could become enemies at a moment's notice. In the Jewish quarter, bankers count coins by candlelight, calculating interest on loans to farmers whose harvests might fail, and to traders whose ships might sink in storms or fall to pirates. The city's various quarters reflect the empire's diversity. Greeks maintain Orthodox churches where they pray in language their grandfathers spoke when Constantinople was still Byzantium. Armenians manage trading houses that connect Istanbul to markets in Persia and beyond. Arabs from Egypt and Syria serve in administrative positions throughout the palace bureaucracy. Bulgarians and Serbs command military units that guard frontiers against Austrian and Hungarian armies. All are your subjects now, bound together by Ottoman law and Islamic administration. But each group maintains traditions and loyalties that sometimes conflict with imperial demands. In your own quarters, you drift between consciousness and sleep, your mind processing the day's events and tomorrow's challenges. The conversation with Ace replays itself in your thoughts. Her intelligence seemed genuine, not the calculated performance of someone trying to impress you with learning she did not really possess. Her questions about historical texts revealed understanding of political complexities that most court officials would struggle to grasp. But intelligence in a harem resident could prove dangerous if it was combined with ambitions that extended beyond serving the dynasty's interests. You remember other women who had seemed promising at first, but later proved problematic. Sultana Safiye had been beautiful and clever, bearing you 3 sons before you discovered she was secretly corresponding with Venetian merchants to arrange trade deals that benefited her family more than the empire. You had not executed her. That would have been wasteful and cruel. But you had reduced her status and influence until she became just another aging concubine, living comfortably but powerlessly in rooms far from the palace's centers of decision-making. The lesson had been important. Beauty and intelligence were valuable qualities in harem residence, but loyalty was essential. Women who bore future sultans needed to understand that their primary obligation was to the dynasty, not to their birth families or their own personal advancement. The empire had survived for centuries because each generation of rulers had been raised to put imperial interests above personal desires, and the mothers of those rulers had to share that commitment or risk seeing their children fail when they eventually took power. Ace seemed to understand these realities, but understanding and accepting were different things. She was young and ambitious, qualities that could serve the empire well if properly directed, but could also create problems if her ambitions led her to challenge established arrangements or seek inappropriate influence over imperial policy. Time would reveal her true character. But for now, you were inclined to give her opportunities to prove herself worthy of greater trust and responsibility. The sound of the palace's water systems reaches your ears through stone walls. Engineers designed these fountains and channels centuries ago to bring fresh water from distant springs to every part of the complex. The constant flow represents one of the empire's great achievements, the ability to build infrastructure that serves practical needs while creating beauty that impresses visitors and residents alike. Roman engineers had been masters of water management, and Ottoman architects had learned from their example while adding innovations that reflected Islamic principles of geometric harmony and divine order. Water also flows through the city beyond the palace walls, supplying public baths, private houses, and the workshops where craftsmen create goods traded throughout the Mediterranean world. The system requires constant maintenance by specialists who understand both the technical challenges of managing water flow across long distances and the political implications of decisions about which neighborhoods receive priority when repairs are needed or expansions are planned. Everything in the empire is connected to everything else in ways that require careful coordination to maintain. Tax collectors in distant provinces send gold to Istanbul that pays for palace maintenance and military equipment. Farmers in Anatolia grow grain that feeds soldiers guarding Balkan frontiers against Austrian invasion. Craftsmen in Damascus create silk cloth that becomes gifts to foreign ambassadors who might otherwise join alliances against Ottoman interests. Break any link in these chains and the entire system becomes vulnerable to enemies who watch for signs of weakness or internal division. Your father had understood these connections and had taught you to see the empire as a vast machine where every component must function properly for the whole to work effectively. He had also taught you that the Sultan's primary responsibility was not to enjoy the privileges of power, but to maintain the systems that allowed the empire to survive and prosper, despite challenges that would destroy less well-organized states. The weight of this responsibility sometimes feels crushing, especially in quiet moments like this, when you are alone with your thoughts and cannot distract yourself with ceremonies, meetings, or entertainments. You control the lives and destinies of more human beings than any other person on earth. But this control brings obligations that never end and decisions that affect generations yet unborn. Every policy you establish, every governor you appoint, every treaty you sign, every marriage you arrange creates consequences that will influence the empire's future long after your own death. Sleep finally claims you completely, bringing dreams that mix memories of the day with images drawn from years of ruling an empire that spans 3 continents. You see Ace reading in her chamber, but she transforms into your mother as a young woman, then into your first wife, then into daughters you never had who might have been born if your life had followed different paths. You see the Venetian ambassador bowing in your banquet hall, but his face becomes that of the Austrian emperor, then the Persian Shah, then rulers of kingdoms that exist only in the geography of sleep. In your dreams, you walk through cities you have never visited but which fly your banners and follow your laws. You speak with governors and generals whose names you do not know, but who serve your empire in distant provinces where your authority is represented by men you have appointed but may never meet in person. You sign documents written in languages you cannot read, but which carry your seal to courts in Africa and Asia, where your diplomatic representatives negotiate agreements that will shape the balance of power for decades to come. The dreams shift and change like morning mist, carrying you from throne rooms to battlefields to gardens where poets recite verses celebrating your victories and wisdom. You see ships carrying your trade goods across oceans to markets in India and beyond, their holds filled with wealth that will buy loyalty from allies and mercenaries, from soldiers who fight under your banners without knowing your name or understanding the causes for which they shed their blood. But even in dreams, you remain conscious of the burden of rule and the loneliness of absolute power. The faces that surround you in sleep belong to people who want something from you: your favor, your protection, your gold, your permission to trade or marry or govern in your name. Few seek your friendship because few understand that emperors need human connection as much as any other mortals. Perhaps more because their positions isolate them from the normal relationships that sustain most people through the challenges of daily life. The night passes in cycles of deep sleep and lighter dreams, your body and mind restoring themselves for tomorrow's renewal of duties that have no end except death. Palace guards change shifts every 2 hours, their footsteps echoing softly through corridors where shadows move as clouds pass across the moon outside latticed windows. Servants light oil lamps in rooms where night work continues, scribes copying documents that will carry your orders to provincial capitals, cooks preparing food for dawn meals, grooms tending horses that will carry messengers across the empire's vast distances. The empire never sleeps completely because its size and complexity require constant attention. While you rest in Istanbul, the sun shines on territories in Asia where your governors are conducting morning business. Provincial courts in Damascus and Baghdad are hearing cases that will be decided according to laws you have established and precedents set by judges you have appointed. Military commanders along the Persian border are receiving intelligence reports about enemy troop movements and making decisions about defensive preparations that could prevent wars or trigger them, depending on how wisely they interpret their instructions and local conditions. In Algiers and Tunis, your naval commanders are planning expeditions against Christian shipping in the Western Mediterranean, calculating risks and rewards of attacks that could bring treasure to imperial coffers or provoke European coalitions that might threaten Ottoman territories in the Balkans. The balance between aggressive action that demonstrates imperial power and restraint that avoids creating more enemies than the empire can effectively fight requires judgment that you cannot provide directly to every local commander, but which they must exercise according to principles you have tried to establish through training, instruction, and the careful selection of subordinates whose loyalty and competence you trust. The complexity of governing an empire that spans such vast distances and includes such diverse populations would overwhelm any individual ruler who tried to control every detail personally. The Ottoman system succeeds because it delegates authority while maintaining accountability, giving provincial administrators enough independence to respond effectively to local conditions, while ensuring that their actions serve imperial, rather than personal interests. But this system works only when the Sultan at its center demonstrates the wisdom and strength necessary to inspire loyalty from subordinates who could easily become rivals if they believed the central authority was weak or unreliable. Your breathing deepens as sleep becomes more complete, and your dreams become less connected to the day's events and more influenced by memories and concerns that occupy your subconscious mind during moments when conscious control relaxes its grip on your thoughts. You see yourself as a young prince learning statecraft from tutors who taught you languages, mathematics, military strategy, and the diplomatic skills necessary for managing relationships with foreign powers, whose friendship or enmity could determine the empire's fate. Those early lessons seem distant now, but their influence shapes every decision you make as sultan. Your Greek tutor taught you to read classical texts that revealed how earlier empires had risen and fallen, usually because their rulers had become complacent or cruel, or lost touch with the sources of their power. Your Persian instructor introduced you to poetry and philosophy that helped you understand the cultural traditions of eastern provinces, where Iranian influence remained strong despite centuries of Ottoman rule. Your Arab teachers explained Islamic law and theology that legitimized your authority while creating obligations to rule justly and protect the welfare of your subjects. The education of Ottoman princes was designed to create rulers who understood both the privileges and responsibilities of absolute power. You learned that successful sultans needed to be warriors capable of leading armies into battle, diplomats skilled in negotiating with foreign powers, administrators able to manage complex bureaucracies, and spiritual leaders who could inspire loyalty through their commitment to Islamic principles of justice and protection for all believers. But no amount of education could fully prepare you for the loneliness and constant pressure of actual rule. As a prince, you had advisors and companions who could speak freely with you about their thoughts and opinions. As sultan, you are surrounded by people who tell you what they think you want to hear rather than what they really believe. The isolation of absolute power means that you must make decisions based on incomplete information provided by subordinates whose own interests may conflict with those of the empire, and you must live with the consequences of those decisions, even when they prove wrong or harmful. The palace around you holds the accumulated wealth and beauty of centuries of conquest and trade, but it also holds the weight of history and the pressure of expectations that each new sultan must meet or exceed the achievements of his predecessors. The rooms where you sleep have housed rulers who expanded the empire's boundaries, defeated powerful enemies, built magnificent cities, and created administrative systems that allowed diverse populations to live together in relative peace and prosperity. The question that haunts every sultan is whether he will add to this legacy or begin the decline that eventually claims every empire in human history. Your dreams carry you through landscapes of memory and imagination where the boundaries between past and future blur like shadows at twilight. You see armies marching under your banners toward victories that may have already happened or may never occur. You sign treaties with rulers whose kingdoms exist only in the realm of sleep, but whose agreements seem as binding as any negotiated in waking hours. You receive tribute from provinces that may be real territories or fantasies created by a mind seeking escape from the constant pressure of decisions that affect millions of lives. In the deepest hours of night, when the palace is quietest and your sleep is most profound, you dream of walking alone through empty corridors that stretch endlessly in all directions. The walls are covered with maps showing territories you have never seen but which owe allegiance to your authority. The floors are paved with marble quarried from mountains whose names you do not know, but which provide stone for buildings constructed in your honor throughout the empire's vast extent. These dreams of solitude and infinite space reflect the reality of your position as ruler of territories so large that no single person could visit them all in a lifetime, governing populations so numerous that you will never know even the tiniest fraction of your subjects personally. The empire exists because millions of people you will never meet accept your authority and follow laws established in your name. But this acceptance depends on their belief that you are wise enough and strong enough to deserve their loyalty and capable enough to protect them from enemies who would destroy their communities if Ottoman power failed. The responsibility of justifying this trust weighs on you even in sleep, creating dreams where you must constantly prove your worthiness to rule through tests that have no clear solutions and challenges that multiply faster than you can address them. You sign documents that transform into butterflies and fly away before you can read what you have agreed to do. You give orders to generals whose faces change before they can respond, leaving you uncertain whether your commands will be understood or followed. You receive petitions from subjects whose voices blend into a chorus so loud that you cannot distinguish individual requests from the overwhelming sound of human need and hope. But these anxiety dreams are balanced by others that remind you of the positive aspects of your rule and the genuine affection many of your subjects feel for their sultan. You see children in villages throughout the empire learning to read using books that include prayers for your health and long life. You hear merchants in distant markets praising Ottoman justice and the security that allows trade to flourish under your protection. You watch soldiers defending frontier fortresses with courage inspired by their loyalty to the dynasty you represent, and their pride in serving an empire that has become synonymous with military excellence and administrative competence. The balance between burden and privilege, between the weight of responsibility and the satisfaction of effective leadership, defines the complex reality of your position as Ottoman Sultan. The power to shape the destinies of nations and the lives of millions brings opportunities to create lasting achievements that will benefit future generations. But it also brings the constant pressure of decisions that could lead to disaster if made poorly or without sufficient consideration of their long-term consequences. As dawn approaches, your sleep becomes lighter and your dreams more connected to the day ahead. You see yourself in the study where you will review reports from provincial governors and receive visitors whose requests will require careful consideration. You imagine conversations with advisors who will seek your guidance on matters ranging from tax policy to military strategy to the management of diplomatic relationships that could determine whether the empire faces new wars or enjoys continued peace. The palace begins to stir around you as servants prepare for another day of activities that will maintain the complex systems allowing the empire to function effectively. In the kitchens, cooks light fires under ovens that will bake bread for thousands of people who live and work within the palace walls. In the stables, grooms prepare horses for messengers who will carry your orders to distant provinces and bring back reports on conditions that require your attention and response. Your eyes open as the first call to prayer echoes across the city, marking the beginning of another day in which you will exercise power that shapes the lives of millions while carrying responsibilities that never end and making decisions whose consequences will influence the empire's future long after your own death. The weight of silk and stone settles on your shoulders once again, but you accept it willingly because you understand that effective rule requires leaders who put the empire's welfare above their own comfort and who find satisfaction in service to causes greater than themselves. The sun rises over the Bosphorus, its light filtering through latticed windows to illuminate maps and documents that will guide your decisions throughout the day ahead. The empire awakens with you, its vast machinery of government and administration beginning another cycle of activities that maintain order and prosperity across territories stretching from the gates of Vienna to the shores of the Persian Gulf. You stand at the window overlooking the Bosphorus and watch the first fishing boats of the day push out from the shore. Their captains wave to each other in greeting, their nets already prepared for the morning catch that will feed families throughout the city. These men know nothing of the diplomatic negotiations that occupied your evening, or the harem politics that will shape your afternoon decisions. They think only of fish and weather and the small concerns that fill ordinary lives. You envy them sometimes, these subjects who serve the empire simply by living their daily routines without the burden of choices that could affect entire nations. The morning breeze carries scents from the city, bread baking in countless ovens, smoke from workshops where craftsmen are already at work, the salt smell of the sea that connects your empire to trade routes spanning the known world. Each smell represents thousands of your subjects beginning another day of activities that contribute to imperial wealth and stability. The baker who rises before dawn to prepare bread for his neighborhood serves the empire as surely as the general who commands armies on distant frontiers. The difference is that the baker's mistakes affect only his immediate customers, while your mistakes can destroy kingdoms. Your first visitor of the day is the master of the imperial mint, a careful man named Hassan who manages the production of coins that carry your image throughout the empire and beyond. He arrives with samples of new gold pieces that will be distributed to provincial governors as gifts, demonstrating your favor and reminding them of their obligations to the central government. The coins are beautiful works of art as well as symbols of economic power, each one handcrafted by artisans whose skills have been passed down through generations of Muslim craftsmen. Hassan explains that demand for Ottoman gold has increased in European markets, where merchants prefer your coins to those produced by Christian kingdoms, because Ottoman gold is purer and more consistently weighted than currencies issued by rulers, who sometimes debase their money to pay for wars or construction projects. This preference for Ottoman currency strengthens your empire's economic influence and provides leverage in negotiations with foreign powers who need reliable money to finance their own activities. But Hassan also reports problems that require your attention. Silver mines in Anatolia are producing less ore than expected, forcing the mint to import metal from sources that may not remain reliable if political conditions change. Counterfeit coins bearing crude imitations of your seal have appeared in markets as far away as Venice and Vienna, undermining confidence in Ottoman currency and potentially damaging trade relationships that generate significant tax revenue for the imperial treasury. You listen to these reports while considering their implications for policies that extend far beyond simple monetary concerns. The empire's economic strength depends on maintaining trust in Ottoman currency. But this trust requires constant vigilance against counterfeiters and careful management of precious metal supplies that could be disrupted by wars or natural disasters. Every aspect of imperial administration connects to every other aspect in ways that require holistic thinking rather than narrow focus on individual problems. Your second meeting is with the chief architect responsible for construction projects throughout the empire. Mimar Sinan is a genius whose buildings rival those created by the greatest masters of previous civilizations, but he is also a practical man who understands that architecture serves political as well as aesthetic purposes. The mosque you commissioned for Belgrade is proceeding ahead of schedule, but Sinan requests permission to modify the original design to include features that will make the building more impressive to local populations who have not yet fully accepted Ottoman rule. The proposed changes would add minarets visible from greater distances and enlarge the central dome to create interior space capable of holding larger congregations. These modifications would increase construction costs significantly, but they would also create a monument that clearly demonstrates Ottoman power and permanence to people who might otherwise hope that imperial control is temporary. Sinan argues that the additional expense is justified by the long-term political benefits of architecture that inspires respect and discourages rebellion. You approve the modifications while asking Sinan to prepare similar plans for mosques in other recently conquered territories. Buildings that last for centuries can secure imperial control more effectively than military garrisons that must be maintained at constant expense and which can be withdrawn if circumstances change. Architecture shapes the landscape in ways that make foreign rule seem natural and permanent, rather than a temporary imposition that might be overthrown when opportunities arise. You are the Sultan, commander of the faithful, shadow of God on earth. Your power is absolute, your responsibilities infinite, your opportunities to shape human history both inspiring and terrifying. This is your burden and your privilege, your destiny and your choice. The empire depends on your wisdom, strength, and dedication, and you will not fail in your obligations to the millions who trust their lives and futures to your leadership. The day begins, as it always does, with the promise of both achievement and challenge, success and struggle, the possibility of greatness and the risk of failure that accompanies all human endeavors worthy of the effort they require. You rise to meet whatever comes, knowing that you are prepared by training, experience, and dedication to serve the empire and its people with all the skill and determination you possess. The weight of silk and stone settles on your shoulders once again as you prepare to carry the burden of absolute power through another evening, another night, and another dawn in service to the greatest empire the world has ever known. But this morning feels different somehow. Perhaps it is the quality of light streaming through your windows, or the particular rhythm of footsteps in corridors below, or simply the accumulated wisdom of 17 years of rule that makes you see familiar surroundings with fresh eyes. The empire you govern has become as much a part of you as your own heartbeat, yet today you are struck by its vastness and complexity in ways that surprise you with their intensity. You think of the millions of people who will wake this morning in territories flying your banners. Farmers in Hungarian villages will rise to tend fields that feed armies defending frontiers against Austrian expansion. Merchants in Damascus will open shops selling goods that traveled trade routes your diplomats negotiated with rulers whose names most of your subjects will never learn. Sailors in Alexandria will prepare ships for voyages that carry Ottoman influence to ports throughout the Mediterranean and beyond. Each of these people lives a complete life filled with hopes, fears, relationships, and daily concerns that have nothing to do with imperial politics, but everything to do with the stability and prosperity your rule provides or fails to provide. A farmer's decision about which crops to plant depends on his confidence that Ottoman administration will protect his harvest from bandits and foreign armies. A merchant's willingness to invest in trade goods reflects his trust that Ottoman law will enforce contracts and punish thieves. A sailor's courage in facing storms and pirates draws strength from his belief that Ottoman power will protect his family while he is at sea. The responsibility of justifying this trust has shaped every major decision of your reign, from the selection of provincial governors to the negotiation of trade agreements, to the deployment of military forces that must be strong enough to deter enemies without being so expensive that they bankrupt the treasury. Each choice involves balancing competing interests and incomplete information while trying to anticipate consequences that may not become apparent for years or decades. Your third meeting today is with representatives from guilds throughout the empire who have traveled to Istanbul to discuss regulations affecting craftsmen whose skills contribute to Ottoman economic strength and cultural reputation. These men represent thousands of artisans whose work creates everything from weapons and ships to textiles and jewelry that demonstrate imperial wealth while providing employment for populations that might otherwise turn to banditry or rebellion if they lacked legitimate means of supporting their families. The guild representatives bring both opportunities and problems that require careful consideration. New techniques learned from foreign craftsmen could improve Ottoman products and increase their competitiveness in international markets. But adopting these techniques might also reduce employment for traditional workers whose loyalty to the empire depends partly on their economic security. Expanding production to meet growing demand could generate additional tax revenue and strengthen diplomatic relationships with foreign customers. But it might also strain raw material supplies and create dependencies on imports that could be disrupted during wars or political crises. You listen to detailed presentations about everything from the quality of steel produced in Anatolian workshops to the availability of silkworms needed for textile production in Damascus. Each industry has its own technical requirements and political implications that must be understood before making policy decisions that could affect thousands of workers and millions of consumers throughout the empire and beyond. The guild system represents one of the Ottoman Empire's greatest administrative innovations, a method of organizing economic activity that maintains quality standards while providing social stability and generating tax revenue for imperial purposes. Unlike European systems that often create rigid hierarchies based on birth or privilege, the Ottoman guild structure allows talented individuals to advance based on their skills and dedication, while ensuring that traditional knowledge and techniques are preserved and transmitted to future generations. But the system also requires constant attention to prevent corruption, ensure fair treatment of workers and consumers, and adapt to changing market conditions that could make traditional approaches obsolete or counterproductive. Guild leaders sometimes use their influence to suppress innovation that might threaten their own positions, while foreign competitors may adopt new technologies that give them advantages Ottoman craftsmen cannot match without changes in training, equipment, or organization. Your fourth meeting involves reviewing proposals for new legal codes that will govern relationships between different religious communities within the empire. The Ottoman system's tolerance for religious diversity requires sophisticated administrative structures that allow Christians, Jews, and various Muslim sects to maintain their own traditions while ensuring that their activities serve rather than undermine imperial interests. Legal scholars have spent months developing these proposals, consulting with religious leaders from throughout the empire, and studying precedents from previous Ottoman rulers who faced similar challenges. The goal is to create frameworks that protect minority rights while maintaining Islamic law as the supreme authority that guides all imperial policy and administration. The complexity of these legal questions reflects broader challenges of governing an empire that includes dozens of languages, religions, and cultural traditions within a single political system. What seems fair and reasonable to Turkish administrators in Istanbul might appear oppressive or inappropriate to Greek Orthodox communities in the Balkans or Jewish merchants in Thessalonica. Policies that work well in recently conquered territories might create problems in regions where Ottoman rule has been established for centuries, and local populations have developed their own accommodations with imperial authority. You study each proposal carefully, considering not just its immediate practical effects, but its long-term implications for imperial stability and the precedents it might establish for future decisions. Legal codes have a way of outliving the rulers who create them, shaping relationships between government and citizens long after specific political circumstances have changed. The choices you make today about religious tolerance and legal pluralism could influence the empire's character for generations to come. Your fifth meeting is with the commander of your personal guard, an elite military unit responsible for palace security and your own physical protection. Captain Yusuf is a veteran of campaigns against Austrian and Persian forces who understands both conventional military tactics and the specialized requirements of protecting a ruler whose death could trigger succession crises that might tear the empire apart. Yusuf reports on security arrangements for upcoming diplomatic events and reviews intelligence about potential threats from foreign agents or domestic enemies who might seek to harm you or disrupt imperial administration. His network of informants extends throughout Istanbul and into provincial capitals where local commanders provide information about suspicious activities or individuals who might pose risks to imperial security. The conversation covers everything from the screening of servants and visitors to the coordination of emergency procedures that would protect you and ensure governmental continuity if palace security were compromised. These precautions might seem paranoid to outside observers, but Ottoman history includes numerous examples of sultans who died from poison, assassination, or palace coups that destroyed dynasties and created chaos lasting for years. Your personal security requires balancing accessibility with protection in ways that allow you to perform your duties as ruler while minimizing risks that could deprive the empire of stable leadership. Too much isolation would cut you off from the information and relationships needed for effective governance. But too little caution could expose you to dangers that ambitious enemies might exploit during moments of vulnerability. The discussion also covers broader security issues affecting the empire's stability. Intelligence reports suggest that Austrian spies are attempting to recruit Ottoman officials who might provide information about military preparations or diplomatic negotiations. Persian agents are reportedly spreading propaganda among Shia populations in eastern provinces, encouraging resistance to Sunni Ottoman authority. Venetian merchants may be using their trading privileges to gather intelligence about Ottoman commercial and military capabilities that could be shared with hostile European powers. Each of these threats requires different responses that must be coordinated carefully to avoid creating new problems while addressing existing ones. Aggressive counterintelligence operations might expose enemy networks, but could also damage relationships with legitimate foreign traders or alienate domestic populations who might interpret security measures as evidence of imperial weakness or tyranny. Your sixth meeting involves consultation with scholars from the palace library who advise you on historical precedents that might guide current policy decisions. These men have studied the rise and fall of earlier empires, analyzing the mistakes and achievements of previous rulers to identify patterns that might help you avoid common pitfalls while building on successful innovations. The scholars present detailed analyses of how earlier Ottoman sultans handled challenges similar to those you currently face. They describe diplomatic strategies that secured beneficial treaties with European powers, administrative reforms that improved tax collection and reduced corruption, and military innovations that gave Ottoman forces advantages over enemy armies. But they also discuss failures and missed opportunities that weakened previous reigns and created problems that subsequent rulers struggled to resolve. This historical perspective helps you understand your current decisions within longer-term patterns of imperial development and decline. The choices you make today will be studied by future scholars who will judge your reign's contribution to Ottoman strength or weakness based on criteria that may not be apparent in your lifetime, but which will become clear as consequences unfold over decades and centuries. The scholars also present proposals for new research projects that could benefit imperial administration. They want to translate additional Greek and Persian texts that contain useful information about agriculture, engineering, medicine, and military science. They seek permission to establish correspondence with scholars in other countries who might share knowledge about innovations that could strengthen Ottoman capabilities. They request funding for expeditions to gather manuscripts and artifacts from regions where ancient knowledge might be preserved in libraries or private collections. These scholarly activities serve practical as well as cultural purposes. The empire's technological and administrative superiority depends partly on its ability to learn from other civilizations while adapting foreign innovations to Ottoman conditions and Islamic principles. Intellectual stagnation could gradually erode the advantages that have made the Ottoman system more effective than those of its rivals, leaving the empire vulnerable to enemies who might surpass Ottoman achievements through their own programs of learning and innovation. Your seventh meeting is with representatives from merchant families who finance much of the empire's international trade. These men control networks of agents and partners that extend from London to India, moving goods and money across vast distances, while providing the empire with both tax revenue and intelligence about economic and political conditions in foreign markets. The merchants report on current trading conditions and future opportunities that could benefit Ottoman commercial interests. Demand for Ottoman textiles remains strong in European markets, but competition from Indian and Chinese producers is increasing. Spice routes through Ottoman territories continue to generate substantial profits, but Portuguese and Dutch explorers are developing alternative routes that could reduce the empire's share of this lucrative trade. New World silver is flowing into European markets in quantities that could affect the value of Ottoman currency and disrupt traditional trading relationships. These commercial developments have political as well as economic implications. Trade revenues help fund military operations and administrative expenses that maintain imperial power, but commercial relationships also create dependencies and vulnerabilities that enemies might exploit during conflicts. Merchants who become too powerful might use their wealth to influence imperial policy in ways that serve their personal interests rather than broader imperial goals. Foreign trading partners might withdraw their business or share sensitive information with hostile governments if diplomatic relationships deteriorate. The conversation covers specific proposals for trade agreements, investment opportunities, and commercial policies that could strengthen Ottoman economic position while reducing risks associated with international commerce. The merchants seek imperial support for new trading ventures while offering to provide intelligence and financial assistance for imperial projects that could benefit both the empire and their own business interests. You listen carefully to these proposals while considering their long-term implications for imperial independence and strength. Commercial success is essential for maintaining the military and administrative capabilities needed to defend and govern the empire. But economic policies must serve political rather than purely commercial objectives if the empire is to maintain its sovereignty and continue expanding its influence throughout the known world. Your eighth meeting involves reviewing plans for cultural celebrations that will demonstrate Ottoman sophistication to foreign visitors while strengthening the loyalty of domestic populations. These events serve multiple purposes beyond simple entertainment, functioning as forms of political communication that convey messages about imperial power, cultural achievement, and religious devotion to audiences who might not be reached through more formal diplomatic or administrative channels. The celebrations will include poetry recitations, musical performances, architectural displays, and religious ceremonies that showcase the diversity and richness of Ottoman civilization. Poets will compose verses celebrating your achievements and the empire's greatness. Musicians will perform compositions that blend Turkish, Persian, and Arab traditions into uniquely Ottoman artistic expressions. Architects will unveil new buildings that demonstrate imperial wealth while serving practical purposes for administration, worship, or commerce. These cultural activities require significant resources and careful coordination to achieve their intended effects without creating problems that could undermine their purposes. The selection of performers, themes, and venues must reflect imperial dignity while appealing to diverse audiences whose tastes and expectations may differ significantly. The timing and scale of celebrations must balance impressive display with appropriate restraint that avoids appearing wasteful or insensitive to subjects who may be struggling with economic hardships or military service obligations. The conversation also covers educational initiatives that will preserve and transmit Ottoman cultural achievements to future generations. Plans include expanding the palace school system, establishing new libraries in provincial capitals, and sponsoring translation projects that will make important texts available in Turkish for readers who cannot access works written in Arabic, Persian, or other classical languages. These educational investments serve long-term imperial interests by creating populations capable of contributing to administrative, military, and commercial activities while maintaining cultural identities that support, rather than threaten, imperial unity. Well-educated subjects are more likely to understand and support imperial policies, more capable of filling positions that require technical skills, and more resistant to foreign propaganda that might encourage rebellion or disloyalty. Your 9th meeting is with medical advisors who monitor health conditions throughout the empire and provide guidance on policies that could improve public welfare while reducing threats to imperial stability. Disease outbreaks can devastate military units, disrupt economic activity, and create social unrest that enemies might exploit during times of crisis. The physicians report on current health conditions and emerging threats that require attention from imperial administrators. Plague has appeared in several Mediterranean ports, potentially threatening major trade routes and population centers. Smallpox is spreading through military units stationed along the Persian frontier, reducing combat effectiveness at a time when border tensions are increasing. Poor sanitation in some provincial cities is creating conditions that could foster disease outbreaks with wider implications for imperial security and prosperity. These health challenges require coordinated responses that involve multiple levels of imperial administration. Military commanders must implement quarantine procedures that balance disease prevention with operational readiness. Provincial governors must enforce sanitation regulations while providing resources for medical treatment and prevention programs. Trade officials must balance disease control measures with the need to maintain commercial relationships that generate essential tax revenue. The physicians also present proposals for improving medical education and expanding access to healthcare throughout the empire. These initiatives could reduce the impact of disease outbreaks while demonstrating imperial concern for subject welfare in ways that strengthen loyalty and support for Ottoman rule. Better medical knowledge could also provide advantages in military campaigns where armies that remain healthy are more likely to achieve victory over enemies weakened by disease and poor medical care. The conversation covers specific recommendations for medical policies, training programs, and resource allocation that could improve health outcomes while serving broader imperial objectives. The physicians seek support for research into new treatments and prevention methods while offering to provide intelligence about health conditions that might affect imperial security or diplomatic relationships with foreign powers. As the morning's formal meetings conclude, you take a few moments to process the information you have received and consider how it relates to broader patterns of imperial governance and strategic planning. Each report and proposal represents a piece of the vast puzzle that is the Ottoman Empire, requiring integration with countless other factors to form coherent policies that serve the empire's long-term interests while addressing immediate challenges and opportunities. The complexity of these decisions reflects the reality of governing an empire that spans 3 continents and includes millions of people with diverse backgrounds, interests, and needs. Every choice you make creates consequences that ripple through systems and relationships, extending far beyond your immediate awareness, affecting individuals and communities whose reactions will shape future events in ways that may surprise even the most careful strategic planning. This afternoon will bring different challenges as you shift focus from administrative matters to the more personal and informal aspects of imperial leadership. The harem's politics will require attention and careful management to ensure that competition among women serves imperial interests, rather than creating instability that could affect succession planning or family relationships. Social and diplomatic activities will provide opportunities to gather information and build relationships while demonstrating imperial power and sophistication to foreign observers. The evening will conclude with the kind of careful reflection and strategic thinking that has characterized your approach to rule throughout nearly 2 decades as Sultan. Tomorrow will bring new challenges and opportunities that will test your ability to balance competing interests and limited resources while maintaining the strength and prosperity that millions of subjects depend on for their daily security and long-term hopes for the future. But for now, the morning's work is complete, and the empire continues its daily cycle of activities that maintain one of history's greatest experiments in human organization and governance. The weight of silk and stone that settles on your shoulders each morning is the price and privilege of shaping the destinies of nations and the lives of millions who trust their futures to your wisdom, strength, and dedication to the complex art of ruling well in a world where power brings both infinite opportunities and infinite responsibilities, springs to every part of the complex. The constant flow represents one of the empire's great achievements, the ability to build infrastructure that serves practical needs while creating beauty that impresses visitors and residents alike. Roman engineers had been masters of water management, and Ottoman architects had learned from their example while adding innovations that reflected Islamic principles of geometric harmony and divine order. Water also flows through the city beyond the palace walls, supplying public baths, private houses, and the workshops where craftsmen create goods traded throughout the Mediterranean world. The system requires constant maintenance by specialists who understand both the technical challenges of managing water flow across long distances and the political implications of decisions about which neighborhoods receive priority when repairs are needed or expansions are planned. Everything in the empire is connected to everything else in ways that require careful coordination to maintain. Tax collectors in distant provinces send gold to Istanbul that pays for palace maintenance and military equipment. Farmers in Anatolia grow grain that feeds soldiers guarding Balkan frontiers against Austrian invasion. Craftsmen in Damascus create silk cloth that gifts to foreign ambassadors who might otherwise join alliances against Ottoman interests. Break any link in these chains, and the entire system becomes vulnerable to enemies who watch for signs of weakness or internal division. Your father had understood these connections and had taught you to see the empire as a vast machine where every component must function properly for the whole to work effectively. He had also taught you that the Sultan's primary responsibility was not to enjoy the privileges of power, but to maintain the systems that allowed the empire to survive and prosper despite challenges that would destroy less well-organized states. The weight of this responsibility sometimes feels crushing, especially in quiet moments like this when you are alone with your thoughts and cannot distract yourself with ceremonies, meetings, or entertainments. You control the lives and destinies of more human beings than any other person on earth. But this control brings obligations that never end and decisions that affect generations yet unborn. Every policy you establish, every governor you appoint, every treaty you sign, every marriage you arrange creates consequences that will influence the empire's future long after your own death. Sleep finally claims you completely, bringing dreams that mix memories of the day with images drawn from years of ruling an empire that spans 3 continents. You see eyes reading in her chamber, but she transforms into your mother as a young woman, then into your first wife, then into daughters you never had who might have been born if your life had followed different paths. You see the Venetian ambassador bowing in your banquet hall, but his face becomes that of the Austrian emperor, then the Persian Shah, then rulers of kingdoms that exist only in the geography of sleep. In your dreams, you walk through cities you have never visited but which fly your banners and follow your laws. You speak with governors and generals whose names you do not know, but who serve your empire in distant provinces where your authority is represented by men you have appointed but may never meet in person. You sign documents written in languages you cannot read, but which carry your seal to courts in Africa and Asia, where your diplomatic representatives negotiate agreements that will shape the balance of power for decades to come. The dreams shift and change like morning mist, carrying you from throne rooms to battlefields to gardens where poets recite verses celebrating your victories and wisdom. You see ships carrying your trade goods across oceans to markets in India and beyond, their holds filled with wealth that will buy loyalty from allies and mercenaries from soldiers who fight under your banners without knowing your name or understanding the causes for which they shed their blood. But even in dreams, you remain conscious of the burden of rule and the loneliness of absolute power. The faces that surround you in sleep belong to people who want something from you. Your favor, your protection, your gold, your permission to trade or marry or govern in your name. Few seek your friendship because few understand that emperors need human connection as much as any other mortals. Perhaps more because their positions isolate them from the normal relationships that sustain most people through the challenges of daily life. The night passes in cycles of deep sleep and lighter dreams, your body and mind restoring themselves for tomorrow's renewal of duties that have no end except death. Palace guards change shifts every 2 hours, their footsteps echoing softly through corridors where shadows move as clouds pass across the moon outside latticed windows. Servants light oil lamps in rooms where night work continues, scribes copying documents that will carry your orders to provincial capitals, cooks preparing food for dawn meals, grooms tending horses that will carry messengers across the empire's vast distances. The empire never sleeps completely because its size and complexity require constant attention. While you rest in Istanbul, the sun shines on territories in Asia where your governors are conducting morning business. Provincial courts in Damascus and Baghdad are hearing cases that will be decided according to laws you have established and precedents set by judges you have appointed. Military commanders along the Persian border are receiving intelligence reports about enemy troop movements and making decisions about defensive preparations that could prevent wars or trigger them depending on how wisely they interpret their instructions and local conditions. In Algiers and Tunis, your naval commanders are planning expeditions against Christian shipping in the Western Mediterranean, calculating risks and rewards of attacks that could bring treasure to imperial coffers or provoke European coalitions that might threaten Ottoman territories in the Balkans. The balance between aggressive action that demonstrates imperial power and restraint that avoids creating more enemies than the empire can effectively fight requires judgment that you cannot provide directly to every local commander, but which they must exercise according to principles you have tried to establish through training, instruction, and the careful selection of subordinates whose loyalty and competence you trust. The complexity of governing an empire that spans such vast distances and includes such diverse populations would overwhelm any individual ruler who tried to control every detail personally. The Ottoman system succeeds because it delegates authority while maintaining accountability, giving provincial administrators enough independence to respond effectively to local conditions, while ensuring that their actions serve imperial rather than personal interests. But this system works only when the Sultan at its center demonstrates the wisdom and strength necessary to inspire loyalty from subordinates who could easily become rivals if they believed the central authority was weak or unreliable. Your breathing deepens as sleep becomes more complete, and your dreams become less connected to the day's events and more influenced by memories and concerns that occupy your subconscious mind during moments when conscious control relaxes its grip on your thoughts. You see yourself as a young prince learning statecraft from tutors who taught you languages, mathematics, military strategy, and the diplomatic skills necessary for managing relationships with foreign powers whose friendship or enmity could determine the empire's fate. Those early lessons seem distant now, but their influence shapes every decision you make as Sultan. Your Greek tutor taught you to read classical texts that revealed how earlier empires had risen and fallen, usually because their rulers had become complacent or cruel, or lost touch with the sources of their power. Your Persian instructor introduced you to poetry and philosophy that helped you understand the cultural traditions of eastern provinces where Iranian influence remained strong despite centuries of Ottoman rule. Your Arab teachers explained Islamic law and theology that legitimized your authority while creating obligations to rule justly and protect the welfare of your subjects. The education of Ottoman princes was designed to create rulers who understood both the privileges and responsibilities of absolute power. You learned that successful sultans needed to be warriors capable of leading armies into battle, diplomats skilled in negotiating with foreign powers, administrators able to manage complex bureaucracies, and spiritual leaders who could inspire loyalty through their commitment to Islamic principles of justice and protection for all believers. But no amount of education could fully prepare you for the loneliness and constant pressure of actual rule. As a prince, you had advisors and companions who could speak freely with you about their thoughts and opinions. As Sultan, you are surrounded by people who tell you what they think you want to hear, rather than what they really believe. The isolation of absolute power means that you must make decisions based on incomplete information provided by subordinates whose own interests may conflict with those of the empire, and you must live with the consequences of those decisions even when they prove wrong or harmful. The palace holds centuries of conquest and the weight of history. Every sultan must match his predecessors or begin the empire's decline. The rooms where you sleep housed rulers who expanded boundaries, defeated enemies, built magnificent cities. The question haunts every sultan. Will you add to this legacy or begin the decline that claims all empires? Your dreams blur past and future. You see armies marching under your banners toward victories that may never come. You sign treaties with phantom rulers whose kingdoms exist only in sleep. You receive tribute from provinces that stretch beyond imagination. In deepest night, you walk endless corridors lined with maps of territories you'll never see, but which bow to your authority. You rule lands so vast no person could visit them all, governing millions you'll never meet. The empire exists because these masses accept your authority and follow laws in your name. They believe you're wise and strong enough to protect them from enemies who would destroy their communities if Ottoman power failed. Even in sleep, responsibility weighs on you. You dream of proving worthiness through impossible tests, signing documents that become butterflies, giving orders to generals whose faces change, hearing petitions that blend into overwhelming chorus of human need. But anxiety dreams balance with reminders of positive impact. You see children in distant villages learning to read with prayers for your health. You hear merchants praising Ottoman justice and security that lets trade flourish. You watch soldiers defending fortresses with courage, inspired by loyalty to your dynasty. As dawn approaches, the palace stirs. Servants light kitchen fires. Grooms prepare messenger horses. The first call to prayer echoes across the city. Your eyes open to another day of shaping millions of lives while carrying endless responsibilities. The weight of silk and stone settles on your shoulders, but you accept it willingly because effective rule requires putting empire's welfare above personal comfort. You stand at the window watching fishing boats push from shore. Their captains think only of fish and weather, ordinary concerns filling ordinary lives. You envy these subjects who serve simply by living daily routines without burden of choices affecting entire nations. Morning breeze carries city scents, baking bread, workshop smoke, salt sea connecting your empire to trade routes spanning the known world. Each smell represents thousands beginning activities contributing to imperial wealth. The baker serves the empire as surely as the general commanding distant armies. The difference: baker's mistakes affect only customers. Yours can destroy kingdoms. Your first visitor is Hassan, master of imperial mint, carrying samples of new gold pieces for provincial governors. Ottoman gold is preferred in European markets, purer and more consistent than Christian currencies. But problems require attention. Silver mines producing less ore, counterfeit coins appearing in distant markets, undermining confidence in Ottoman currency. Your second meeting involves Chief Architect Mimar Sinan. The Belgrade Mosque proceeds ahead of schedule, but he requests modifications, taller minarets, larger dome, to impress populations not yet fully accepting Ottoman rule. You approve. Understanding buildings lasting centuries secure control better than military garrisons. Intelligence reports from European capitals reveal Austrian-Polish alliance negotiations, Venetian merchants exploring new trade routes, French diplomats secretly encouraging raids while maintaining public neutrality. Your spy network extends from London to Moscow, gathering information requiring careful analysis to separate truth from misinformation. Janissary representatives requested additional recruitment and improved weapons. These elite soldiers, recruited as children from Christian families and converted to Islam, form your military backbone. You approve while establishing oversight, ensuring commanders remain accountable to civilian authority. Provincial governors' reports reveal a usual mixture of achievements and problems across 3 continents. Tax collection proceeds smoothly in most provinces, but some report crop failures, bandit activity, and resistant local nobles. The most challenging come from territories not fully accepting Ottoman rule, requiring balance between law enforcement and local accommodation. You are the Sultan, commander of the faithful, shadow of God on earth. Your power is absolute, responsibilities infinite. The empire depends on your wisdom, strength, and dedication. You will not fail the millions trusting their futures to your leadership. Your 6th meeting is with the Grand Vizier, your most important advisor, and the man responsible for coordinating the complex administrative machinery that governs the empire's daily operations. Ibrahim Pasha is intelligent, experienced, and completely loyal, but he also bears enormous responsibilities that could overwhelm even the most capable administrator. His morning briefing covers developments that require immediate attention, as well as long-term trends that could affect imperial policy for years to come. Ibrahim reports that negotiations with Venetian representatives are proceeding well, with agreement likely on most issues that have created tensions between the two powers. However, he also warns that some Venetian demands could set precedents that other European powers might exploit in future negotiations. Every diplomatic agreement creates expectations and establishes principles that affect subsequent discussions, making it important to consider not just immediate benefits, but long-term implications of concessions that might seem minor in current context. The Grand Vizier also discusses internal administrative matters that require your approval or guidance. Several high-ranking officials have requested transfers to different positions, usually for personal reasons, but sometimes because of conflicts with colleagues or superiors that could affect their effectiveness in current roles. These personnel decisions may seem routine, but they actually shape the empire's administrative culture and effectiveness by determining which individuals hold positions of responsibility and influence. Ibrahim raises questions about fiscal policy that will affect the empire's ability to fund current operations and future expansion. Tax revenues are sufficient for normal expenses, but major military campaigns or construction projects would require additional resources that could be obtained only through increased taxation, borrowing from wealthy merchants, or reducing expenditures on other activities. Each option has political and economic implications that must be carefully considered before decisions are made. The morning's final official meeting is with your personal secretary, who manages correspondence and scheduling that keeps you connected to the empire's daily operations, while ensuring that your time is used efficiently for activities that require your direct attention. Today's correspondence includes letters from foreign rulers seeking to establish or improve diplomatic relationships, petitions from subjects requesting intervention in local disputes, and reports from scholars and artists seeking imperial patronage for projects that could enhance the empire's cultural reputation. Each piece of correspondence requires response, but the tone and content of your replies will be interpreted as signals about imperial policy and your personal attitudes toward various issues and individuals. A friendly letter to a foreign ruler could be seen as indicating willingness to negotiate about disputed territories. A generous grant to support artistic projects might encourage other creative individuals to seek imperial patronage. Every communication from the Sultan carries weight beyond its immediate content because recipients analyze your words for clues about future opportunities and threats. Your secretary also presents the day's schedule, which includes additional meetings with officials, a review of architectural plans for palace renovations, and the evening's entertainment for visiting dignitaries. Each activity has been planned to serve specific purposes related to imperial administration, but the schedule also reflects the ceremonial and social obligations that reinforce your authority and the empire's prestige. The careful management of your time and attention represents one of the most important aspects of effective rule. The empire's complexity means that countless issues compete for your consideration, but your human limitations require choosing which matters deserve personal involvement and which can be delegated to subordinates. Making these choices well requires understanding not just the immediate importance of various issues, but their long-term implications for imperial stability and prosperity. As the morning's formal business concludes, you allow yourself a brief period of private reflection before the afternoon's activities begin. The weight of the decisions you have made and will continue making throughout the day settles on your shoulders like the elaborate robes that mark your imperial status. Every choice affects thousands or millions of your subjects, but you must make these choices based on incomplete information and uncertain predictions about future consequences. The loneliness of absolute power manifests itself most clearly during these quiet moments when you are alone with your thoughts and the full magnitude of your responsibilities. No other person in the empire faces decisions of comparable scope and consequence. No one else must balance competing interests and limited resources while maintaining the stability and prosperity that millions of people depend on for their daily survival and future hopes. Yet this loneliness is also the source of your strength and effectiveness as a ruler. Because you stand apart from the factions and interests that compete for influence within the empire, you can make decisions based on what serves the greater good, rather than narrow partisan advantages. Your isolation from normal human relationships is the price of the objectivity and independence that effective leadership requires in a world where personal loyalties and immediate benefits often conflict with long-term imperial interests. The afternoon brings a different rhythm to palace life, as the formal business of morning gives way to the more complex social and political activities that occupy your later hours. The harem's influence becomes more apparent, as women who cannot participate directly in official meetings exercise their power through informal channels that shape your perceptions and decisions in ways that may not be immediately obvious, but which accumulate over time to significantly impact imperial policy. You have learned to navigate these informal power structures with the same care and attention that you apply to official administrative matters. The women of your household possess intelligence networks that often provide more accurate and timely information than formal intelligence services. Their understanding of human nature and social dynamics frequently offers insights that complement or correct the analysis provided by male advisors who may be excellent administrators, but who lack the subtle perceptiveness that characterizes the most successful harem residents. The balance between formal and informal sources of power and information represents one of the distinctive features of Ottoman governance. While European courts often exclude women from political influence, the Ottoman system recognizes that effective rule requires understanding all dimensions of human behavior and social organization. Women who cannot command armies or sign treaties may nevertheless shape the empire's future through their influence on the men who do hold formal authority, and through their role in raising and educating the princes who will eventually inherit imperial responsibility. This afternoon you will spend time in the harem quarters, not for physical pleasure, but for the political intelligence and personal insights that these conversations provide. The women who compete for your attention and favor also compete with each other in ways that reveal character traits and capabilities that could prove valuable in future roles. Some demonstrate the kind of intelligence and judgment that would make them effective advisors if given appropriate opportunities. Others show the ambition and determination that could serve imperial interests if properly directed. The conversation with Ace that you anticipate this afternoon will serve multiple purposes beyond evaluating her personal qualities and potential usefulness. Other harem residents will observe your attention to her and draw conclusions about your current preferences and future intentions. These observations will influence their own behavior and alliances in ways that could either support or complicate your broader political objectives. Managing harem politics requires the same strategic thinking that you apply to international diplomacy or military planning. Every action creates reactions that must be anticipated and either encouraged or counteracted depending on their likely effects on the complex web of relationships that connects the palace to power centers throughout the empire. A gift that seems like a simple personal gesture could ultimately influence succession arrangements that determine the empire's future leadership for generations to come. The afternoon will also include meetings with cultural and religious leaders whose support helps legitimize your authority and maintain social stability throughout the empire's diverse territories. These individuals may not control armies or tax revenues, but they shape the beliefs and attitudes of populations whose loyalty is essential for long-term imperial success. Their approval of your policies can make implementation easier and more effective, while their opposition can create resistance that undermines even well-designed initiatives. Islamic scholars, in particular, wield enormous influence over your Muslim subjects through their interpretation of religious law and their guidance on questions about how believers should respond to imperial policies and social changes. Their support for the Ottoman system helps justify your authority in religious terms, while also providing practical guidance for administrators who must apply Islamic principles to the complex realities of governing diverse populations across vast territories. Christian and Jewish religious leaders in various parts of the empire also play important roles in maintaining social order and supporting imperial authority within their communities. The Ottoman system's tolerance for religious diversity requires careful management of relationships with these leaders to ensure that their influence serves imperial interests rather than encouraging separatism or resistance to central authority. The empire's cultural achievements also require your attention and support to maintain the intellectual and artistic vitality that enhances imperial prestige and attracts talented individuals from throughout the known world. Poets, architects, scholars, and craftsmen who work under imperial patronage create works that demonstrate Ottoman civilization's sophistication, while also preserving and developing knowledge and skills that contribute to practical imperial capabilities. The library projects that you have sponsored help preserve manuscripts and books that might otherwise be lost to time and neglect, while also making knowledge more widely available to administrators, soldiers, and others whose work serves imperial interests. The translation projects that bring Greek, Persian, and Arab texts into Turkish help create a common intellectual foundation for Ottoman culture, while preserving the wisdom of earlier civilizations that the empire has inherited or conquered. As the afternoon progresses toward evening, your thoughts turn increasingly toward the day's final major activity, the entertainment and diplomatic discussions that will occupy the hours after sunset. These events serve multiple purposes that extend far beyond simple hospitality or personal pleasure. They provide opportunities for informal conversations that can advance negotiations more effectively than formal diplomatic sessions, while also demonstrating imperial wealth and sophistication to visitors who will report their impressions to rulers and merchants throughout Europe and beyond. The careful orchestration of these social events requires the same attention to detail and strategic thinking that characterizes successful military campaigns or administrative reforms. Every aspect of the entertainment, from the selection of musical performances to the arrangement of seating to the choice of gifts presented to departing guests, communicates messages about imperial power, cultural achievement, and political intentions that may prove more influential than formal diplomatic declarations. The empire's reputation for hospitality and magnificence helps attract foreign visitors who might otherwise avoid contact with Ottoman officials, providing opportunities for gathering intelligence and building relationships that serve long-term imperial interests. Merchants who experience generous treatment during visits to Istanbul may become advocates for improved trade relationships with the Ottoman Empire when they return to their home countries. Diplomats who are impressed by imperial wealth and organization may advise their rulers to seek accommodation rather than confrontation with Ottoman power. But these social and diplomatic activities also require enormous resources and careful management to ensure that they achieve their intended purposes without creating problems that could damage imperial interests. Excessive displays of wealth might provoke envy or fear among foreign visitors, rather than inspiring respect and cooperation. Cultural performances that seem too foreign or exotic could reinforce negative stereotypes about Ottoman civilization, rather than demonstrating its sophistication and achievements. The balance between impressive display and appropriate restraint reflects broader challenges that face any empire seeking to project power and influence across cultural and religious boundaries. What inspires awe and respect in one audience may create suspicion or hostility in another. Effective imperial diplomacy requires understanding these cultural differences and adapting presentations accordingly, while maintaining consistent core messages about imperial capabilities and intentions. Your evening's work will extend far beyond the formal entertainment, as you continue processing information gathered throughout the day and making decisions that will shape tomorrow's activities and longer-term imperial policies. The empire never sleeps because its size and complexity require constant attention to developments that could affect millions of lives and vast territories. While you rest in Istanbul, dawn is breaking over provinces in Asia, where your governors are beginning another day of administration, and your soldiers are maintaining vigilance against enemies who never abandon their hopes of imperial conquest. The interconnected nature of imperial governance means that decisions you make tonight, in response to information gathered today, will influence events that unfold over coming weeks and months throughout territories spanning 3 continents. A letter you sign could determine whether provinces in Africa receive additional military support to resist Portuguese expansion. A meeting you approve could lead to trade agreements that affect economic conditions for millions of merchants and craftsmen throughout the Mediterranean world. The weight of these responsibilities never fully leaves your mind, even during moments of rest or entertainment that might seem to offer escape from the constant pressure of imperial decision-making. Every sultan before you has carried this same burden, and every sultan who follows you will face similar challenges. The empire's survival and prosperity depend on each generation of leadership successfully managing the complex balance between competing interests and limited resources that defines the reality of governing one of history's greatest political achievements. But this burden is also your greatest source of satisfaction and purpose. The opportunity to shape human history and improve the lives of millions of people provides meaning that transcends personal comfort or individual ambition. The empire you lead represents one of humanity's most successful experiments in organizing diverse populations under common systems of law and administration, while maintaining the flexibility necessary to adapt to changing circumstances and challenges. The legacy you will leave depends not just on the territories you conquer or the buildings you construct, but on the administrative and cultural foundations you strengthen for future generations of Ottoman rulers. The decisions you make and the precedents you establish will influence imperial policy long after your death, shaping the experiences of subjects not yet born and determining whether the empire continues to grow and prosper or begins the decline that eventually claims all human institutions. Tomorrow will bring new challenges and opportunities, new information to process and decisions to make. The eternal cycle of imperial governance will continue as it has for centuries, and as it will for centuries to come, sustained by the dedication of leaders who understand that effective rule requires subordinating personal desires to the greater good of the empire and the subjects who depend on its continued strength and wisdom. The weight of silk and stone settles on your shoulders once again as you prepare to carry the burden of absolute power through another evening, another night, and another dawn in service to the greatest empire the world has ever known.